Over the years, I've spent a lot of time in Paris, and I think I love it more than any other city. And one time I got together, I edited this little collection called Paris Studio with lots of people's short stories in it. And not just short stories, poetry and descriptions. And there's a piece in here that I'm rather fond of that I wrote. I was staying at the International Arts Studios there. But it was winter, in fact it was Christmas, and it was snowing and I was very cold. I was depressed. I was feeling sorry for myself, the victim. Living in a studio in Paris with my expenses paid, and I thought myself as a victim. I knew better than to stay in the studio alone, so I crossed the Pont Louis-Philippe. It was too cold to walk far, so I planned to go into a little cafe on the corner there that I liked. It was on a corner where the Ile Saint-Louis is linked to the Ile de la Cité by a short flat bridge. It's what I thought of as a demilitarised zone, in the sense that most of the tourists from the back of Notre Dame Cathedral get as far as this bridge and then stop and bunch up like cattle at a gate. They look across to the cafes where Parisians and pseudo-Parisians like me sit quietly. It's a captive audience. They're entertained by street performers, jugglers, sax players, and the inevitable standing still, gold-painted figure of somebody you can't recognise. I like to sit there. But on this occasion, the cafe on the corner was closed, just when I needed a strong coffee and some steamy windows and a lot of incomprehensible chatter around me. So I stumped on down the narrow street, and the snow was making diagonal dotted lines from the tall buildings to the pavement. And then I heard music. For me, there are only two kinds of music, really. Music in the major key and that in the minor. I know that the major keys are usually happier, more open-minded sounds, but I gravitate towards the minor. I like the blues. I like gypsy music. And it was Eastern European music with a wailing, dying fall that I could hear ahead of me. A violin, crying its Slavonic heart out. The snow changed its direction and then faltered and started to whirl around on the spot, as though caught up in the quickening tempo of the violin. Where was the music coming from? And then there he was, standing in a doorway that did little to protect him from the icy wind, wearing an excuse for an overcoat and an old woolly hat. He was tall and straight, except maybe around the shoulders. He had a beard that was the colour of snow and off-white, and it looked as though it might have just settled on his face. At first I couldn't see his eyes, but I could see his cold, bare fingers curled around the strings, tapping themselves on the strings so that I imagined the music flying off in notes of snow particles and joining the rest of the whirling white ghosts that were filling the street. My whole being felt as though it was being played on. All the yearning melodies, sadness deeper than sadness. Then I met his eyes. I was just a few feet in front of them. Transfixed. His eyes were like those of an old trusting dog. There was nothing between us, and I felt a flowing, melting between us as my heart thawed out, and my eyes filled with tears that began to trickle down my cold cheeks. I saw that there were tears in his eyes as he continued to stroke the world's sadness out of his strings. I saw that he was crying unashamedly. And so we stood in the snow at dusk in a narrow Paris street, two old men looking into each other's eyes and crying. I had reached that intense place where sadness and happiness confess that they are the same person. I had been meaning to give the street musician some money, but now I couldn't. No matter how much she might have needed money, I could no longer use that to bridge across to her. I'd gone too far, but he knew. I stood for another long, snow-covered moment, and then I walked on, tears cold now on my cheeks, and the music seemed to whirl off into the snow-filled air behind me. I didn't need to know who he was or where he came from. Correction. I knew who he was and where he came from. I would just never be able to put it into words.